Imagine the world beneath the glassy surface, beneath the river's tumble, where the cut bank shelters, and the current is a wind bringing life. Imagine a ceiling where sunlight glints and plays, where the mayfly dances and the rain throbs. For 1,000,000 years, the cutthroat trout, named for the bright red slash found beneath its jaw, has indicated the health of our western rivers. The presence of the cutthroat guarantees high levels of oxygen, aquatic nutrients, and cold, clean water. It means a good chance of spotting a diving osprey or a flock of cranes in migration. It also holds the promise of warm, quiet days in September, when the first of the cottonwood leaves begin their drifting descent to the water's surface. When Lewis and Clark explored the American West, cutthroat trout filled the lakes, rivers, and streams. Yet even 1,000,000 years of evolutionary success could not prepare the cutthroat for what was to come. In the last 200 years, their populations have declined across the West. But the story of the cutthroat is far from over. Scientists, conservationists, and anglers are joining forces to save this native fish. And a new hope is on the horizon: the return of the cutthroat trout. The story of the cutthroat begins with a return. It is springtime in the West. The cold winter is finally ending, and the streams are beginning to thaw. The melting snows and rising water temperatures signal an annual event. The cutthroat trout is spawning again. Acclaimed artist and writer Russell Chatham has always been inspired by rivers, fishing, and trout.
I would certainly not want to live without the passions I have. Fishing for a fish like a cutthroat trout that is a native species is very important, because part of that passion is seeing that species survives.
Each spring, mature fish return to the very same gravel bed where they once hatched. Some cutthroats stay close to home, while others travel great distances to spawn. Scientists believe that the trout find their birthplace by recognizing the exact chemical fingerprint of the tributary where they hatched. This spawn is the beginning of a new generation, but the journey home can also be treacherous. As the fish swim into shallow stream beds, they are vulnerable to attack. But many of the fish escape predators and reach the spawning grounds. Female cutthroats seek out specific gravel beds where upwelling water will bring oxygen to developing eggs. Digging a shallow hole in the gravel, called a redd, the fish deposits her eggs. Competing males follow quickly behind and cover the eggs with a thick cloud of sperm. Unlike their salmon cousins, trout do not die after reproducing and may live to spawn 3 or even 4 more times. For the next few weeks, The eggs remain hidden beneath the protective rocks. Buried much deeper beneath the rocks, scientists have found fossils that hint to the secrets of the cutthroat's past. Just how long have even the most recent subspecies been thriving in our western streams? One scientist has spent his life solving the mysteries of trout.
The origin of cutthroat trout might go back about 2 million years. By about 1 million years ago, that cutthroat line had divided into 4 major groupings.
Their remarkable evolutionary migration began in the distant coastal waters of the Pacific and carried the cutthroat across the entire western expanse of North America. During this voyage, the cutthroat split into 4 diverse ancestral lines. The oldest of these lines is the coastal cutthroat, which makes use of both marine and freshwater environments. The first distinct break produced the west slope cutthroat. This subspecies established the largest territory. The family divided again, forming the Yellowstone cutthroat, which is now the greatest population of pure cutthroat trout. The last distinctive group to evolve grows to the largest in size. The Lahontan cutthroat can weigh up to 40 pounds. With the subdivisions of these 4 major lines, several other unique subspecies evolved, such as the Rio Grande, Colorado River, Bonneville, and Greenback. But how did these fish swim over the several mountain ranges along the way? Scientists believe the cutthroat began to journey east up the Columbia River Basin over 1 million years ago. During the great ice ages, glaciers advanced and formed huge ice dams, stopping rivers and turning valleys into lakes. As water levels rose, the fish gained access to new waterways. When the ice dams broke and the water retreated, the trout were often left above impassable barriers or in entirely new drainages and evolved in isolation. In one of these watersheds, the few weeks necessary for the eggs to develop have passed, and thousands of small fry emerge into a world of complete self-dependence. For the first few days of life, the fry are fed by their yolk sac.
One of the most remarkable things about trout in the wild is their extraordinary ability to survive. They have to take advantage of every single opportunity they have to feed. They're designed to be survivors.
But in most of the cutthroat's remaining territory, survival has become more difficult. Predators have been introduced. Dams block migration routes. Habitat has been altered. Even 1 million years of evolution could not prepare the cutthroat for such changes.
The cutthroat trout has not had time to adapt to human-induced conditions. They like the coldest, cleanest, purest waters. They like the canary in the mine. They don't tolerate much environmental change.
Change was on the horizon in 1805, when Meriwether Lewis and William Clark set out to explore the West. As the expedition crossed the Great Falls of the Missouri, Silas Goodrich, one of their fishermen, returned to the party with a full stringer of trout they had never seen. Clark reported the discovery of the species. Its scientific name, Oncorhynchus clarki lewisi, is derived from this encounter. Lewis and Clark's famous expedition opened up the American West. Flocks of pioneers seeking fortunes and a better life followed. The tales of 19th century pioneers and travelers are filled with stories recording the amazing abundance of what had become known as the black-spotted trout. In the years between the 1860s and the early 1900s, a new America pushed westward with a goal of developing the territory's vast resources. In addition, still unregulated waters were routinely overfished. The new American economy flourished, but the cold, clean streams where the trout spawn became harder and harder to find. And the cutthroat that had been so abundant began to disappear. As it became apparent that populations of native trout were declining, efforts were made to restock western streams and rivers with non-native species. In 1870, Congress set up the U.S. Fish Commission with the goal of propagating and distributing desired sport fish. By 1873, aquarium cars loaded with rainbow, brown, and brook trout crisscrossed the country, carrying the non-native fish to rivers, streams, and lakes throughout the cutthroat's territory. It was only a matter of time before these introduced sport fish would become legendary across the angling world.
In the era of the time, there was no modern concept of ecology, of species niches, of interaction, of ecosystems. Your only purpose was to get those non-native species distributed.
Non-native fish rapidly spread across the cutthroat's habitat. In small streams where cutthroat often hatch, aggressive brook trout took over. Brook trout are less sensitive to the impacts of development. Even in warmer or more silt-filled waters, they reproduce with great success. Because brook trout spawn in the fall, the bigger, hungry juveniles outcompete the following spring hatch of cutthroats and can devastate the population. In the larger drainages, a bigger and more aggressive fish was stocked, the European brown trout. While cutthroats feed primarily on insects, brown trout feed on other fish. As the stomach of a brown indicates, a single meal can consist of 5 or more smaller fish like the cutthroat. But the most threatening non-native fish was also the most widely distributed, the rainbow trout. Where rainbows co-evolved with the cutthroat, as in the Columbia River Basin, the two species reproduce in isolation and preserve genetic diversity. But introduced non-native rainbows spawn at the same time as the cutthroat, causing hybridization of the two species. Such crossbreeding can wipe out the entire cutthroat gene pool.
The way rainbow trout are particularly inimical to cutthroat trout is that they're close enough related, they hybridize. There seems to be no barrier to hybridization. And once it gets started, it can't be stopped because the hybrids are fertile.
With no natural adaptations for such competition, nearly all of the cutthroat subspecies have declined. As early as 1905, the yellowfin cutthroat became extinct. By the 1940s, the greenback, Bonneville, and Lahontan cutthroats were also believed to be gone.
Typically, a menu of decline always includes things like, pollution and overfishing, but you put it into one word, it's non-native species.
Today, the remaining cutthroats are ever threatened by the enormous presence of non-native fish.
We don't have any planet to lose. I think if we see native species in trouble or disappearing, it means we're not behaving correctly.
The fate of the cutthroat in the nation's oldest park illustrates the impact of non-natives on an ecosystem. The Yellowstone cutthroat is one of only 2 species of fish native to the Yellowstone River drainage above the park's famous upper and lower falls. Yellowstone Lake is home to the world's largest pure cutthroat population. The sheer abundance thrilled early visitors to the park. Annual catches of 300,000 fish have been recorded, and it is estimated that the region's predators consumed an equal amount. But in the early 1990s, park managers discovered that lake trout had been illegally introduced into Yellowstone Lake. Lake trout are fierce predators. Within the park, 99% of their diet consists of cutthroat. The lake trout live in much deeper water, beyond the reach of many species that have depended on cutthroat for their survival. The entire ecosystem has been affected by the invasion.
If the cutthroats are there in their natural habitat, yes, it's a rare environment, and it requires our protection.
But how can these cutthroats have a chance in the waters that remain? It became very clear that it would require great efforts to save our native trout and to undo some of the damages that were inflicted on their habitat. Fish and wildlife agencies began a widespread inventory of native cutthroat. Where were the pure stocks located? How secure were these populations from competing species, hybridization, and habitat degradation? What could be done to reestablish cutthroat populations in tributaries where they had been lost? Across the West, scientists began searching for genetically pure cutthroat. Most of these fish are found in isolated, high alpine environments, where a natural barrier has stopped the migration of non-native invaders. Amazingly, some of these surveys discovered remnant populations of greenback, Bonneville, and Lahontan cutthroats, all fish that were once thought to be extinct. Pure stocks of the other declining subspecies were also located. Conservationists seized the opportunity and began working to save these subspecies. Often the first step in restoring cutthroat to their previous distribution is collecting eggs from wild populations. Scientists collect eggs from the females by squeezing along their bellies. Sperm are gathered from males, like this Colorado River cutthroat, whose spawning coloration has turned him a brilliant red. These gametes become the source of future generations. Sometimes these fertilized eggs are transplanted directly into prepared streams. In other cases, they are brought to a hatchery. Sheltered there, survival rates rise significantly. When the fish have reached a sufficient size, they are stalked back into the wild.
There are certain situations which are fixable if people pay attention and if they take the right course of action.
But before any fish can be returned to the wild, a suitable habitat must be located. This requires isolation from non-native fish and cold, clean water. Often streams have to be restored before cutthroat can survive in them again. Many streams have been straightened and cleared of natural obstacles to create pathways for industry. Other streams have been degraded by early grazing practices or cleared of trees that shadow and cool the water temperature. To restore such waters effectively, conservationists must understand the trout's underwater habitat. It is not the same calm stream that we might imagine from our topside view. Beneath the surface, the trout's world is a fierce hydraulic storm, a world dominated by perpetual winds, whirlpools, and twisting currents. To survive, the cutthroat requires gaps in the incessant flow of water. A boulder, a fallen tree, or a cut bank can offer a chance to rest and protection from predators. Such protection is vital, for even as the juveniles grow bigger, they must continue to avoid predators. Collaborating with ranchers and landowners to restore disrupted habitat, conservationists must build in protections for the fish by creating bends in the stream and replacing silt-filled river bottoms with gravel. The next step is to place large boulders and trees back into the river On some ranches, livestock drink from stock tanks, and barriers have been placed alongside a cutthroat stream to protect it from degradation. Before cutthroats can be introduced, the stream must be isolated from non-native trout. Usually, cutthroats are placed in the upper sections of a small stream above an impassable barrier, like a waterfall. In the absence of a natural barrier, conservationists create one. The final critical step to a successful reintroduction is removing all of the non-native fish that remain upstream of the barrier.
If you want to transplant a cutthroat trout back into the water they once inhabited, you have to get rid of all of the non-native brook trout, brown trout. Any non-native trout has to be eliminated.
When possible, fisheries personnel use an electrofishing technique. A low-voltage shock momentarily immobilizes the fish. Non-native fish are netted and removed, while cutthroat are placed back into the stream. In streams where electrofishing is unfeasible, specially designed chemicals that have been approved by the EPA must be used to ensure all non-natives are removed.
Harmless to humans, to mammals, or birds, chemical treatment. But it's the only feasible way to get rid of the non-native trout in more than just the tiniest of habitats.
Once the non-natives are gone, the stream is ready and the drainage is restocked with pure strains of cutthroat trout. Throughout the cutthroat's range, the success of such efforts holds the promise of a future for the trout. Greenback, Paiute, and Lohanton numbers have increased 1,000-fold. In Montana and Idaho, efforts on behalf of the West Slope cutthroat have significantly improved the size of available habitat by linking suitable streams together. After the long historical decline of the Rio Grande cutthroat of New Mexico, its numbers are finally recovering. In a rare and hopeful example, the fine-spotted variety of the Yellowstone cutthroat has been able to maintain dominance in most of its range. In Yellowstone Park, a fierce fight against the introduced lake trout is underway. Each year, tens of thousands of lake trout are removed in an effort to reduce their numbers. Perhaps one day, hidden away in a small forgotten mountain stream, scientists will find a tiny population of the yellowfin cutthroat and bring it back from extinction.
As long as we have access to clean gene pool, no, I don't think it's ever too late. Giving up is the worst thing you can do.
The work to save the cutthroat is far from complete. But in a healthy natural environment, the cutthroat will certainly turn chance into life. And it is not just conservationists that are happy to see them return. These otter pups have had their hunting lesson and wait anxiously for their mother to finish. As the cutthroat begin to return to the wild, a new generation of otters, bears, and birds celebrate the return.
As other people learn more about the wonders of this beautiful fish, so more people can experience the thrill that I have of finding rare native cutthroat trout and participating in restoration programs.
It's really important to pay attention to these rare species of cutthroat trout because that's what evolved here over the millennia. It's just a great thing to experience them as they were before we got here.
Imagine a stream that runs cold and clear, where native trout rise as they have for 1,000,000 years. Imagine a day that is warm as a hand, when the current bends and pulls, and shadows move in the riffles. And remember the cutthroat, for whom this is home.